Hey there, welcome. Today we're talking about wrapping your wood, MDF specifically. First up on our list, we're gonna start with not applying the vinyl, but how to remove it. Both new vinyl and old vinyl. Be real quick, I'll just show you the tools that you probably will need, at least make your job way easier. If you watched my first video, you'll remember this bad boy that I put on here and put different coatings on here to try to test the longevity and how tough it would be, the scratch resistance and all that stuff. I uploaded that video in February, I think, of 2018. So this thing is getting pretty old. It spent about 6 months just outside thrown in my yard, and then ever since I've had it just kind of thrown around the shop. I just wanted to keep it like I said, to do like a really long-term review of this. So first up, the main thing you're gonna need is definitely some sort of heat blower. Hot air is your friend when it comes to removing vinyl. This is a heat gun. You can also use a hair dryer. It takes a little longer, it doesn't work quite as well, but you can accomplish it, and it's way better than not using anything at all. So what we're gonna do is try this hair dryer on this little decal right here. Maybe. There we go, that sounds great. We're just gonna warm this up and see how easy it is to peel this label off. And with the hair dryer, we're gonna have to get really close. This type of removal is going to be like taking labels off of boards, taking labels off of pre-built furniture, everything like that. So you can see now when I pull on this, it doesn't have any of that tearing noise, any of that sticky adhesive noise when you try to pick something and then the paper starts tearing. So it comes off completely in one piece. So that's a good way to take it off. Just general packaging and things that have those annoying, almost always cheap labels on there, and those are the toughest to deal with because they're cheap and you get what you pay for. Next up, let's try to remove the vinyl that I applied to the face of this drawer. Again, we're just gonna use the hair dryer. I just applied this on there a couple of days ago. So it's cured for the most part, but it hasn't been out in any weather or anything like that. So basically want to heat it up just like you would heat up any other decal, only you're gonna start with the edge so you can get a hold of it to be able to pull it off of there. But to start, I'm gonna heat up the whole thing. Just gonna let that blow on there to warm that up. And while I'm doing that, I'm gonna remove the screws for the handle because I forgot to do that. So heat that up, and then once we just pick an edge off of there, and because this drawer's metal, that's of course gonna help. If this is raw wood, it's kind of hit or miss if it was sealed or not, but as long as you got decent quality vinyl, you can get this started and pull on it, and then once you get it started, heat this up kind of as you go along here. And again, a hair dryer works, but a heat gun, of course, is way faster. You can see right here, this stuff is sticky. This is a metal drawer that had been painted, powder coated decades ago or whatever, but peeling this off there, I did heat it up, but it still did pull a little bit of paint off there. But in this case, doesn't matter at all. And if it's a newer product, you're not gonna have that issue. It's not gonna pull the paint off there as long as you heat it up and it's a good solid sealed surface. So there we go. All peeled off, all clean, no adhesive left at all. Like this is perfectly clean surface. Like it's probably cleaner than when we put the vinyl on there because adhesive helped pull out any grime off the surface. Now, we're gonna try one that I know is old and I know has been out in the weather. This one might be a little trickier. We're gonna try this bottom decal of my logo here. First we'll try this. This was covered with rattle can clear spray paint. It's held up really well. We'll see how well it comes off. She's toasty. We're gonna take a razor blade and get the corner started. Oh yeah. So it does come right up, but the adhesive is no longer stuck to the back of the decal. Like it's literally ingrained into the wood and it's still a little gummy. So in the case of this one, it's just too old and too gone, but it's fine. Like the vinyl itself comes right off. perfectly fine. It just leaves the adhesive behind, so that this would involve a bit of cleanup. We'd have to sand it down. It needs to be resealed anyway because it's wood to get a good surface to stick to. I didn't seal this wood when I applied these oh my God, it's been 4 years ago. 4 years ago, I didn't seal this, so that's probably a lot of the reason why the adhesive stayed behind, because it kind of ingrained itself into the grain of the wood, haha. Good old MDF, the bane of most people's existence if you ever built anything with it or cut it, because it's disgusting and the sawdust gets caught up in you, and it's a nightmare if you have any sort of allergies, or even if you don't. It's terrible. My last video, by far, the most questions that I had asked was about MDF. It was about, does it need to be sealed? Can I apply over it? Can I apply it if it's painted? Can you wrap it over the edges? And the answers to all those are yes and no, which is, of course, a wonderful answer, right? I'm gonna do my best to show a couple of things, and then we're gonna wrap a piece, and I'm gonna show you some tips and tricks on how to get kind of the best results out of it. But first, because I've never actually done this test myself, I took 2 pieces of 1/4-inch MDF. One of them I sealed with 3 coats of water-based finish, 3, and in between I sanded with 320 grit sandpaper, so it is a super smooth finish. The other side is just raw MDF. I cleaned it, of course, wiped it off, blew it off with an air gun, and then I put this vinyl on there and did nothing else. So I'm gonna pull this off here. We're gonna see if we can tell the difference between just the raw MDF and the one that was sealed. So first, let's start with the sealed one. This vinyl's only been on here a few days. I don't need to heat it up because I know this is good quality vinyl. So you can see as soon as we start to pull it up, there's nothing on the vinyl except a few little specks, which, to be honest, is probably just dirt that I didn't get cleaned off good enough. But we take that off there, it's perfectly fine. Again, this is the one that was sealed. It's an absolute perfect condition, just like it was after I put the finish on there. Now, let's pull the one off that was raw and see what it looks like, because honestly, I don't know. Wow, first off, huge difference. This one was stuck really well. I had to pull pretty hard on this. This one, I don't have, 2 fingers is pulling this off, and it is super, super dirty. So that's my fault. I didn't get it cleaned good enough. The result is it didn't stick worth a damn. The vinyl is super dirty. This piece is trash, cannot be reused. And now the surface feels super fuzzy and rough. We would need to sand this down a little bit to smooth it back out to even hope to get anything to stick to it. That kind of answers our question. Does MDF need to be sealed on the face? And the answer is, it makes a huge difference. It does not have to be. If you did a very, very good job of cleaning the face of this and used good, high quality, super, super aggressive adhesive vinyl, it would be fine for most cases. But sealing it makes a huge difference. It really makes the surface a lot smoother and gives the adhesive something better to stick to. So I'm gonna say 90% of cases, it is better to coat the MDF. And I would almost always use water-based finish. You could use a non-wax shellac, that would work as well. You could use lacquer, even though lacquer is kind of nasty, but it dries fast. You'd have to use a few more coats of lacquer, but you could by all means use that. So next up, I want to show you the absolute critical importance of, if you are going to wrap MDF, you have to seal the edge. There's just...
Can you say it again?
Why is Alexa talking to me? Alexa, stop. I'm videoing. Holy crap. Okay, the absolute importance of sealing the edges, because vinyl just won't stick if it's not sealed. So as a quick example, I have just a scrap piece of MDF here, and the edge is just completely raw. If we take this vinyl, apply it to this just super, super quickly, we're not concerned about how it's applied. We make sure that it's got all the pressure that it needs to stick down. You know what? We'll even heat it up to make sure that it's sealed down in there. You're gonna see 2 things. 1, it's not gonna stick very well. And 2, probably the most important thing is it looks terrible. You're gonna see every little bit of texture in the edge there, and it doesn't matter how, you can sand it all the way up to 1,000 grit. The edge, it's just like a sponge, and it just doesn't finish like the face does. So we have that on there. When you peel it up, like, there's no sticking, and there's just dust and dirt all over it. It's just not gonna work. So I made these two pieces, and these are made the exact same way. I sanded all the edges up to 320 grit, and then I put, again, 3 coats of water-based poly on here, sanding in between, trying to get at least the best finish that I could. And it's not perfect. It's very difficult to get this to be very, very smooth, and I'll show you that. But we're going to apply this piece to this one, and I'll show you some tricks on how to apply it. But as we can see here on the face like this, where there's no seam, of course, it looks very smooth. The corner looks nice. Right here where the edge of it is, I'm gonna try to get this on camera. You can just barely see a line. And I really tried to pay a lot of attention to this and sand it down very well, at least very well. I sanded it well, but you can still see that line. So I just wanted to reinforce the fact that you can put a lot of work into this and still see the edges and the lines on MDF projects. So it's not impossible. You could work and work and work to get that fixed up and get that super smooth. Somebody that's better at sanding and finishing than me could probably get a very smooth finish, but it's not easy. It's just not easy to do. Now, if you're not bothered by that line, then it's perfectly fine, you know, just like it is. So we're gonna take this piece, again, it's built it the exact same way that I did that one. It might even be a little smoother on this side, I'm not sure, but we're going to apply this to this, and I'm gonna kind of go through the steps to show you best ways about doing that. So the first thing we wanna worry about, we wanna make sure that it's clean. And again, as long as you have some sort of finish on here, the best cleaning, one of the best cleanings, at least that I've found, because it works on all kinds of vinyl wrapping, is 50% water and 50% isopropyl alcohol, 50% denatured alcohol, just 50-50, doesn't have to be straight alcohol. Use that just to get all the grease and dirt off of everything. You have a good clean start, it'll make your life a lot easier. So anytime we wrap on this, we want the piece, of course, to be an inch or so bigger than the entire surface. That's really important, because if we're gonna wrap over there, we don't want it to be right to the edge, because that's gonna make, again, it's gonna make your life difficult. What I'm gonna do with this piece, I'm gonna stick right here on the corner first. Just a little bit. I'm gonna take my squeegee. Run it right down the middle and across each side. And then after we get that stuck, we come back up to the corner, and again, I'm gonna rub just to break that corner over. And again, you're gonna want to pull this tight. And then as I pull this over, I'm pulling it all the way over to the other side and pushing down on the very end. Because this is pressure sensitive, it only really wants to stick when you put pressure on it. So I put those two corners, and if we pull and stretch over the top, it makes it a lot easier to get a clean corner than if you try to push the top and then work your way down. That just doesn't work very well, and what you'll end up with, if you try to do it that way, is kind of a puckered corner up here. It gets air trapped under it, and because the vinyl's not stretched over, it just looks terrible. So after you put that all over there, you wanna make sure and get everything pushed down really well. And once that is pushed down really well, it's not a super requirement, but it is best if you heat the vinyl up to kind of set the adhesive. And again, you can use a hair dryer, but it really doesn't get hot enough to really set the vinyl. It needs to get pretty hot, almost to like a melting point. So after we have that, pull up and see, we have a nice, smooth surface. And even though I finish that the best that I can, you can still see a faint line there. And I would just have to either pull that off and redo it if I wanted to have that to be a super clean finish there, or just kind of live with it, you know. And then, of course, one of the most important tools in your toolbox is a sharp razor blade. So if we were just doing the face of this, you literally go around the corners, run your sharp blade along the edge, kind of putting a little bit of pressure up against the side of the wood to use that as a guide. And we go all the way around, cut that, and then we end up with a matching piece like this one. And of course, you'd want to be a little neater than I'm being there. There we go, got 2 matching pieces. And again, this is just wrapping the face. So what if we say, Derek, I don't want to wrap just the face, I want to wrap all the way around the edge. Well, you just made your job not infinitely, very, very much more difficult. If you want to wrap the face and the edges when it comes to MDF, or anything, to be honest, it does get a lot trickier, and it really depends on the type of finish that you really want. Do you want absolutely no seams at all? If you have just a small seam, is that okay with you? That really kind of depends on you and the kind of look that you're going for. So let's say that we got this piece back to this point. Now we want to wrap this edge over here, and we want to wrap this face over here. The easiest way to go about doing this, and still a very clean look, we can wrap this face by pulling pressure over the side, smoothing that down. Again, this has been sealed very well with, again, some water-based finish usually works best, but again, you could use lacquer or whatever you might want to use. The easiest way to get this other face wrapped is just to make some very small cuts right up into the corner. Put your blade right into the corner on the inside and cut outwards. And that's going to give us the relief cuts that we need to be able to wrap this around. So we would wrap this face. We don't need this very long at all. We're going to put this about 1/8 of an inch past the side. So we wrap this around the end, push that down, and then we're going to go about 1/8 of an inch inside the corner and cut that off of there. And you can cut as much off as you want. The more you cut off, the less you're going to see it. But as soon as you cut that off, we'll pull this down and do the same thing. And when you pull that around, you can see it gives a very clean corner, but you do see a faint line right there where we wrap that around. But it makes sure that there's vinyl all the way around and there's no wood showing. So then you'd have to do the same thing up here. You make a relief cut, pull this down, trim it back again about 1/8 of an inch or so. Then you pull this part down. Don't get in a hurry like me. We pull that across, and even though we got it, again, it's nice and smooth, you're still gonna see that seam there. And then of course, we'd wanna trim this back. And this only matches up, of course, if you have vinyl that's all one solid color. But again, you see the seam there a little bit, but it does wrap the edges and it would stick very well. So another very common application for vinyl, maybe even the most common, would be covering a piece of furniture like IKEA, and that's gonna be made out of melamine. Super common, It's just particle board with the slick surface on the outside. Melamine actually works great for having things not stick, glue and whatnot, but it does respond very well to vinyl, oddly enough. The main thing about anything melamine, the face, super easy. As long as you clean it with 50-50 alcohol and water, it's going to stick to it and be fine. Pretty much every time. We can stick this down on the face, just use our squeegee like anything else, and it's probably one of the easiest substrates, wow, one of the easiest substrates that you can apply vinyl to. Honestly, super easy. Where it gets tricky is the edges. MDF edges have to be sealed, and they're tough to look good when you wrap them. Whew. Melamine chipboard, it's not impossible, but I'm not even sure that it's worth all the work that it takes to make it look good. Because if we just do raw melamine like this, we can wrap it over there. We absolutely can wrap it. And we can squeegee it down. We could even take our heat gun and heat it up to make sure that it's really set down in there. And we're gonna notice a couple of things. One, it looks terrible. It has the texture of the particle board. But then two, it's never gonna stick. Like, I sanded this down up to 600 grit sandpaper. It's never gonna stick. So that, in relation to melamine, that I have sealed the edge. And this was quite a bit of work for this one edge. I literally had to use glazing putty to kind of fill in, and then I used filler primer, 2 coats of that, sanding with 400 grit in between, and then at the very end I put another coat of just white primer on there. I know that a lot of people have good luck using drywall spackle to kind of fill it in to give it a sealed edge, but I worked and worked and worked to try to get this edge as good as I can. And I'll just show you. We put this on there, apply it over. Pull this over. Whoops. Again, we'll heat it up. This is about, man, I want to say 4 or 5 different coats of product to get this sealed to where it looks decent like this. Go ahead and wrap this over the back, but you can see it is a great edge. Like, it would be absolutely perfect to be able to wrap a shelf or whatever on that edge. But it's a lot of work. It's a lot of sealing and a lot of primering and a lot of sanding and a lot of resealing. So it's kind of up to you whether you think it's worth it or not. Can it be done? Yeah, of course it can be done, but is it worth all the work? I'll leave that up to you. But you can get a nice edge on it, and this vinyl would stick very well to that primer. You would have no problem doing that. And to be honest, when this is wrapped here as one piece across that, you can't dip it in water, of course, but it's going to be moisture resistant because the vinyl is waterproof and water's not going to soak through it. So if you spilled something on this and this was completely covered in this, it would have a little protection against moisture. So do what you will with that little tidbit of information. But again, melamine, particle board, the edges, terrible. They have to be sealed very well and filled in even to be able to lock that texture in and get a smooth surface to where you can get any kind of surface at all that looks very decent. So we talked about the importance of sealing, and although it's not 100% necessary if you're just doing the face, if you're doing the edges, absolutely has to be sealed. There's just no way around it. This stuff is like a sponge. It's like a sandy sponge. It's terrible. So I've used all of these things with really good success. Probably my favorite would be shellac as far as sealing the edges because it dries so quickly and it's so much less toxic than lacquer. Lacquer will stink up the whole place. Although lacquer will work fine, it dries quickly. Like I said, shellac dries just about as quickly as lacquer does, not near as poisonous. And then of course you got water-based poly, which is great on the face. I still like to do a coat of shellac on the edges because anything water-based with MDF is usually just bad news. It works fine, you just have to be really careful and do light coats. The shellac you can do a little heavier and get away with, again, heavier coats, so it builds up a little faster. And I usually do probably 3 coats. You could even get away with doing more, and it'd be better, especially on the edges. But you just want to be able to, when you run your hands on there after you sand it with 320 sandpaper, or really fine sandpaper, you just want to be able to run your hands on there and it feel kind of like the surface. You don't want to feel that gritty, sandy feeling. You want it to be really smooth. So that's the best way to deal with MDF for sure. So now I want to demonstrate kind of a real life scenario. We got a piece of vinyl, we want to put it on a piece of furniture. So we're going to put it on this mocked up drawer face here. And I want to show you a couple of different ways as far as cutting around the corner, folding over the corner, all the different options we have. And again, this has all been sealed 3 coats, sanded at 320. So we're going to get a little more comfortable and we're going to try to wrap this drawer. Another fantastic use of the old adjustable height workbench video I did a couple videos back is it's adjustable. Imagine that. So it works great for vertically clamping stuff. So now we're pretty solid, and you definitely want to make this as sturdy as you can, of course, to not be flopping all over the place when you're trying to get this done. And of course, the tools needed, you want to make sure it's clean, sharp razor blade, like sharp, and a squeegee. And of course, your vinyl graphic. You also may want a fan because I have air conditioning in here, but it's still freaking hot. So like we do every other graphic, we want to make sure, or it doesn't have to be a graphic, be a solid color, it's all the same thing. You want to be sure, of course, that it overlaps a little bit on each edge, especially if you're wanting to cover the edges. If you're just wanting to cover the face, then we don't have to worry about that. We talked about the hinge method in our last video about vinyl, about applying big decals. So if you're uncomfortable with just throwing it on here and squeegeeing it like this, you can by all means do the hinge method and get a very accurate result to line things up and whatnot. But all I'm gonna do is flatten that out, simple as that. Run my finger along the edge to make sure I know exactly where those corners are. And then we're gonna heat this up a little bit to make it very maneuverable for our next step. Okay, so for this one, we wanna make sure we know where the corner is, and we're going to take our razor blade and we're gonna put a cut just past that corner, and we're gonna pull it out at about a 45-degree angle. Cut it. And then what we're going to want to do is on the front, we're going to make a cut to get rid of our excess. And then we want to start at this edge, pull this down, a little bit of pressure, and then when we get to this end, we'll go ahead and stick that down so we're nice and smooth, and we'll go ahead and pull that on around that edge. Just a little bit around this edge, 1/8 of an inch, maybe even less. And if you want, we take this knife, sharp knife, and we cut that off straight and leave maybe just a 1/16 of an inch wrapped around that corner. You want just enough so that when we pull this down, we're able to trim this straight and you won't even see that seam. Unless you're really looking. I mean, you have to really be looking. So like I said, we pull this down, go around this side, and now when we trim this off, got to warm up out of the way. All we're going to need to do this corner, we can smooth these edges, and again, because this is sealed and this is good vinyl, we can pull it up, put it down as many times as we want until we heat it up and get it really cured on there. We're going to cut right at the corner. We're going to bring this around. We're going to wrap that around the corner underneath this side. And I didn't even get a very smooth cut there. I thought my blade was sharp, but apparently it is not. We make that, if we make that a smooth cut, we can bring that down around like that. Make that smooth. And if you wanted to, we could trim what we tucked under there a little bit and you wouldn't see that much, but I'll bring the camera around here so that you can see this a little better of what we end up with when we just quickly just cut one side, wrap it around, and fold the top over. It covers the corner, and well, we got a little wrinkle here, but again, just pull it up, put it back down. So we're a bit hard to see, but you can see just a faint line right there in the reflection that we get across there. And then to wrap this other side, all we gotta do is just continue across here, pulling a little pressure down, and wrap all the way across. And as long as we have our edges sealed good, we are not gonna have any problems with adhesion. I can simply turn the drawer around, pull this up a little bit because we got a little bit in a hurry. We're gonna do the exact same thing. We're gonna pull up to this corner, make sure we know where our corner's at, make sure I have a sharp razor blade this time. Cut that out. And again, we can pull this right around this corner and we can leave that and you're gonna see a faint line there. Or we can go right down this edge, just like that, and cut that away. And I've found that usually if you cut a straight line there, you notice it even more when you have that seam that goes across there. So then we can take this piece here, be very careful, and cut it as straight as we can. Heat that up just a bit because we got kind of a jagged cut. You can see how that heat really fixes that right up. So then we pull that down right on that corner. And when we push that down on that corner, it looks dang near like a factory seam. I mean, it looks really good. So then you don't even have to disturb that. You can pull this, go right back around. We'll do the same thing for the back corner. And we'll have some really nice corners on this drawer. So that's about it as far as there is wrapping MDF. We got our drawer wrapped around the corners. Again, it's just how neat you want to be, how detail oriented you are. And then of course, once you get it around the faces, you just tuck it around the back, take your squeegee and kind of push it down there and trim it up along the edges. And then you have a nice face. And the stuff is pretty tough. It's gonna scratch. It's kind of like, it's probably like light duty epoxy. Epoxy is pretty tough, but it does show scratches over time. And this stuff will definitely show scratches. It's not as strong as paint, probably good paint. But it's really a cool way to bring new life to old furniture. You can get any color under the sun. It's good we have options. I mean, you might want to wrap it in gold. You might want to wrap it in blue foil. Who knows? But there is lots of options. I hope I answered a lot of questions for everybody from the last video. I'm sure there'll be more questions. And again, there's lots of videos on YouTube that go in even more depth on other ways that you can wrap around square corners and get different results. I'll try to leave a couple of those down in the description so you find out more info if you want to find out more info. Thanks for watching the video, guys. I hope you learned something. I learn something every time I do this, and I've been doing this for a long time. So please ask all the questions you want down in the comments. I will answer as many of them as I can get to. Sometimes I can't get to all of them, but please ask away and I'll do my best to answer those questions. Thanks again. See you in the next video.